Two REITs make wild profits in their Halifax holdings. McGill loses its second injunction to have student protesters removed. The feds and CN finally come to an agreement over what to do with Quebec City's iconic cantilever bridge. A barge crashes into a bridge in Texas, causing an oil spill. A bus crash kills 8 Mexican migrants in Florida. Civilians killed in Amara region of Ethiopia, and Slovakia's PM survives assassination attempt. Good morning. It's Thursday, May 16th. Man, that was more headlines than I thought it was going to be. I'm Nora. Here are those headlines. First to Halifax, where Killam REIT and Cap REIT have released financial reports to show that they are rolling in cash that they take from tenants each month who live in their massive real estate holdings. Killam Apartment REIT had $15.24 million in profits last year off its Halifax apartments alone. That was about 12% more than they made last year. Cap REIT did even better. They had almost a 14% increase over last year and made $9.26 million in profit in Halifax alone. CBC's Andrew Lamb is reporting that the income was driven by higher rents and lower utility costs. Neil Love, a real estate guy quoted in the article, says this, quote, "It's a good time to be a landlord," unquote. No doubt, Neil. The government has handed the landlords their tenants' heads on a platter as they increased the allowable rent cap from 2% to 5% last year. The result was a higher annual increase in rent, as you might imagine. Lamb doesn't mention much about what makes REITs particularly special. These are real estate income trusts that pay nearly nothing in taxes. And actually, they pay nothing in taxes at all if they pay out 90% of their rental income to shareholders. The idea is that the REIT isn't taxed, the shareholders are. It's a model that artificially keeps rents high while REITs are under no pressure to make necessary maintenance repairs to their properties. And by the way, corporations that pay corporate tax also then have employees who pay income tax. So this whole argument that REITs should be tax exempt is completely ludicrous. In 2021, reining in REITs was part of the deal made between the Liberals and the NDP for the NDP to prop up the government. This week, Trudeau finally admitted that he had absolutely no intention of taxing the REITs. Next to Quebec, where Daniel Rowe and Amy Luft are reporting that McGill just scored a second L in trying to get students to take down their Palestinian Solidarity camp. In this case, Justice Marc St-Pierre was unswayed by McGill's argument that an injunction was necessary. McGill had said that there had been violence at the camp, and St-Pierre said that it was not a credible statement, as there had been no violence, including, St-Pierre notes, during a confrontation with counter-protesters. Montreal's Mayor Valérie Plante said this, quote, "We have every confidence that the experience and sensitivity of the SPVM, as well as the proactive maintenance of a dialogue between the university and the people occupying their land, will preserve the calm and security of the site. Our priority is to preserve the peaceful character of Montreal and avoid the escalation of tension seen in the United States," unquote. We'll stay in Quebec for big news about what happens when large infrastructure is privatized and then left in disrepair. The federal government has agreed to purchase back the Pont de Québec, the historic cantilever bridge that is one of my city's most iconic structures. The cost will be $1 billion spread over 25 years for repairs and a new paint job. Justin Trudeau told reporters today, quote, "It's a perfectly good bridge," unquote. And oh boy, he's right about that. It's a great bridge. But it's an old bridge. It opened in 1917 and requires a lot of money to repair. It was also the first bridge in North America made out of nickel and steel. Now, that $1 billion isn't actually going to CN. To acquire the bridge, Ottawa paid the giant corporation $1. It's a symbolic payment. And then CN and the Quebec government will be co-responsible for ownership of the rails and the roadway that are part of the bridge. This has been one of the most pernicious political issues in Quebec City for ages. While no one will likely celebrate the Liberals for finally figuring out what to do with the bridge, it is a feather in the cap of the two Liberal MPs in Quebec City. Liberal MPs that are like the only ones outside of the city of Montreal. I'm kidding. Or half kidding. I'm sure there's a couple of Liberals somewhere near Gatineau. Recall that while the bridge was being built, 89 workers were killed during 2 bridge collapses. Now to other bridge news, but this time in Texas. The Associated Press is reporting that a barge has slammed into a bridge pillar, triggering an oil spill. It also closed the only road that leads to a small town and a university. The accident happened in Galveston, and it's the bridge that goes to Pelican Island. A tugboat lost control of two barges that it was pushing. A bad current and high tide made the conditions difficult. The barge that spilled the oil can hold 30,000 gallons, but it wasn't immediately clear if it was full when it spilled. They are now trying to clean up the oil spill, and 10.5 kilometers of the waterway has been closed. The barge is owned by Martin Petroleum. The bridge goes over Pelican Bay. It opened in 1960, and the bridge received a rating of poor last year by the National Bridge Inventory. Next, we'll stay in the U.S. but move to Florida. A pickup truck crashed into a bus carrying 40 people, killing 8 passengers. The passengers were farm workers from Mexico. NBC News is reporting that the driver had been in a crash 3 days before and had, quote, taken a cocktail of drugs the day before, unquote. The crash happened near Dunallen, Florida. Brian McLean Howard, the man who caused the crash, said that he didn't remember how it happened, but he was in the wrong lane at the time. The bus was bringing the workers to Cannon Farms, north of Orlando. Next, Agencia Nova News is reporting that drone attacks on Sunday killed numerous civilians in the Amhara region of Ethiopia. The attacks happened in Kawat and Moalale districts of the North Shua area. 4 people at least were killed in one attack that hit an elementary school while teachers and parents were meeting together. But Deutsche Welle reports that there may have been more victims, citing eyewitnesses who said 7 teachers at least were killed. Recall that the relationship between Amhara's leadership and the Ethiopian government isn't great. The Fano militias, who are involved in managing Amhara, have been allies with the Ethiopian army in their aggression in the Tigray region. When the ceasefire was signed between Ethiopia and Tigray in 2022, the Fano militias were supposed to have joined the federal army, something that they now refuse to do. And finally, Robert Fico, Prime Minister of Slovakia, is in critical condition after an assassination attempt yesterday. The Deputy Prime Minister, Tomas Tarawa, said that they believe he will survive. Fico was shot in the stomach. The way the CNN has written this is pretty weird, though. So here, he was shot with, quote, 1 bullet entering his stomach and another hitting the joints, unquote, said CNN. They don't say which joints or what that's actually supposed to mean. Fico is a populist who has divided Slovakians, reports CNN. He is seen as both a caring leader who's had the best interests of Slovakians at heart, which, quote, poses major risks for the country, unquote. Slovakia had been a supporter of Ukraine until Fico was elected. Then he promised to stop supplying military gear and would block Ukraine's bid for NATO membership. Fico has been prime minister for a decade. His government has tried to change laws to make sentences lighter for corruption charges, and he wants to replace the public broadcaster with a new entity. Those are your headlines for Thursday, May 16th. I'm Nora. Listen, I'm going to be trying some things that are a little bit different, I think, with the daily news, including the headline. I want to hear what you think about the changes that you see in your feed, because I want you to get an idea of what you're going to listen to rather than just seeing the date of the daily news. The other thing that I'm thinking about doing is creating a separate feed for the daily news. The feeds will be continued together for a while during a transitionary period, but then you'd have to move to a separate feed to get the daily news. It's all still part of Sandy and Nora, but it's trying to make this a little bit more coherent, considering that people listen to both podcasts, but also to the podcast separately as well. So that's not going to happen for a while, but if you have an opinion on it, I would love to hear it. You can get at me. I don't know, figure it out. There's a lot of different ways. You are listening to this podcast at sandynora.com, on the Real News Network podcast feed, and anywhere you get your podcasts. I hope you have a wonderful Thursday, and I will talk to you tomorrow.